That was quite the introduction to Alvino Rey. And, was Alvino Rey the father of the pedal steel guitar? Some would say yes. I would say maybe. I'm going to show you another side of Alvino Rey that is not often talked about, and that is Alvino's own retelling of music history, in which he sort of makes himself out to be the only one who ever played the pedal steel guitar correctly. And that basically the pedal steel guitar was hijacked by the country western genre and ruined. There's many components to this story, so I want to start by telling you that Alvino Rey was the first artist to be recorded on record playing a steel guitar with pedals. He was also the first artist to record a solo album of steel guitar with pedals as the featured act. And he was definitely the first non-Hawaiian artist to bring the steel guitar to national attention, and the first iconic entertainer of the steel guitar, kind of like we'll later see with Buddy Emmons, Sarah Jory, and even Robert Randolph, whose careers we've already covered in this series. As far as I can tell, the first recording that Alvino Rey plays a pedaled guitar on is this 1941 recording of the Alvino Rey Orchestra. We can definitely hear the steel guitar loud and clear in the mix, and there's a point about 15, 16 seconds into this where you could definitely hear a passage where it sounds like there has to be pedals on this guitar. So Alvino Rey was born in 1908 in Oakland, California. He started out playing the banjo when he was a teenager. And now when I say banjo, I'm referring to the banjo as the Dixieland jazz instrument, not the banjo style that we hear in folk and bluegrass music. That's an important distinction to make, because at no point in Alvino Rey's life or career does he attribute any of his influence or style to anything outside of Hawaiian music and classical music and big band and orchestra music. Alvino Rey did not believe that popular music, the kind of music we think of as like folk and country, rock, blues, pop, etc., he didn't seemingly think that this was even a dignified form of music. And I don't know of any other steel guitarist we'll ever talk about in this series who had a career like that. One thing he does share with the steel guitar community was his love for electronics, mechanics, and just like fiddling with things. He was a real hobbyist. And he was also one of the first ham radio operators. So he was a very industrious musician, and he was a very accomplished guitar player as well. He later became, of course, a steel guitarist, a pedal steel guitarist, technically, as well as a sideman. He was an actor, a composer, a conductor, musical director, radio host. He was an inventor, and he was a record producer. He is a member of the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame, and he is the maternal grandfather of Win and Will Butler, who both, the hugely successful band Arcade Fire. So at one time, going way back, of course, Alvino Rey was probably one of the highest paid musicians in show business. Now, he claims to have installed an electric pickup in his banjo in the 1920s, which would likely be well before anyone else had ever done that. By 1935, Gibson hires him to help engineer an electromagnetic pickup with a guy called John Kudelak. And this was being designed for the electric guitar. This electric coil pickup for Gibson was one of the first pickups ever on an electric guitar, in fact. And that whole story has been quite well documented, so we do have proof of all of this happening. Along with his work at Gibson, he developed the electro harp pedal guitar. So I'm going to show you a picture of that now. You take a look at this. He used 6 pedals to bend the strings, so that's going to be 15 years at least before we hear Bud Isaacs playing Slowly by Webb Pierce. He recorded with that guitar, I believe in that 1941 recording of him and his orchestra playing Liebstrom. I believe that's the guitar that he's using there. So Alvino Rey was also the co-inventor of one of the very first pedal steel guitars. As for inventing the talk box and the talking steel guitar, well, Alvino Rey himself claims that this was his idea originally, and he says that this wasn't really so much of an invention as it was just sending a microphone through the pickups with the steel guitar. And actually his wife, Louise King, she sang the vocal off stage, hidden from the audience. And he was experimenting with this talking steel gimmick in the early 1940s as well. So that's going to be way ahead of Pete Drake, way ahead of Peter Frampton and everyone else in the talking steel guitar story. But luckily for all of us, I don't believe the talking steel guitar is going to be making a comeback anytime soon. Let's take a look at a video clip now of Alvino Rey and his talking steel. This is on the 1959 Lawrence Welk show. And keep in mind that this is a mimed performance, all right? So there's a simulated reacting performance that they be playing to the track. Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, at what point was he using pedals in this performance? Well, you'll seldom hear Alvino Rey playing anything that resembles a modern pedal steel guitar for 2 reasons. Number one, his guitar was set up with pedals that would change all the strings with a single pedal. Number 2, he wasn't even interested in playing melodic pieces of music with note bending in it. That was never his intention or never his interest to do. He wanted to make chords that the Hawaiian steel guitar traditionally made. He wanted to improve these chords and make them more beautiful. And he also liked to play harmonics. And of course, his big thing was making sound effects with the steel guitar. The idea of what a steel guitar was to Alvino Rey is very different from what we think of it now, which is in part why this video is called The World According to Alvino Rey. I can't think of anyone who ever played the steel guitar in the same style as Alvino. There were people who did, but the only one I'm really familiar with in any way is a lady called Latricia Candle. And she was also a quasi-celebrity during the same time period with the steel guitar, but that's a whole different story, and that's another video altogether. It's possible that Alvino Rey might have even resented the fact that the steel guitar ended up, becoming his legacy and so attached to his name, because he doesn't really speak about it with any great fondness or love of the instrument. He often reminisces about his career as a banjo player and as a 6-string guitarist, and he sort of speaks of them in a more glorious way than he does speak about his steel guitar playing, which he kind of downplays quite a bit. At this point, we should just listen to him speak rather than me telling you all of these things he may or may not have said. Have a listen for yourself. This is a 2001 interview. This is on the NAMM website. And this is Alvino Rey at 90 years old talking about the steel guitar.
So I got fascinated when the steel guitar added the electric pickup. Was designed down there, National in Los Angeles. They brought me one up, and I immediately fell in love with it and used that on the radio and on the stage and everything. It became a big seller for me. And making the different sounds, making wah-wahs and tiny noises and all, that's all. It sort of fascinated me electrically, not musically, but musically it had its place too. But it's also been ruined as of today, you know. I shouldn't say everything, but they've made a big noise out of a guitar today. It's not a guitar anymore. It's an exponent of electrical noises. But they're fascinating to a lot of people, you know.
Keep in mind he's 90 years old in this interview, so you know maybe we got to cut him some slack. Although he does seem pretty sharp, but it is one of the most, absolutely one of the most fascinating parts of the Alvino Rey story is this story that he stuck to about his indifference towards the modern pedal steel guitar and country music. Here's another clip. Now, this is 7 years earlier. This is in 1994. This is a phone interview, and he's sharing more of his thoughts here about the pedal steel guitar.
Now, the pedal steel guitar is also something that it was quite popular in country and western music. Was that the exact same instrument I'm thinking of?
Well, it's a shame to call it adopted by the country music people because it wasn't intended to be that way. The steel guitar with the pedals was to enhance and to improve the Hawaiian steel guitar so that harmonically the chords could be more beautiful and more musical. And then the cowboys, I keep calling them, the country people, which are highly successful. I'm not putting them down. They had all of a sudden they adopted the guitar, the so-called pedal guitar, for their effects in country music, and it really it's a shame that it's just established with country because it's really a more musical instrument than the country people use it as. And I'm trying to put out some records now to prove that because in a non-country vein, but that's where I am in my era today.
It's kind of hard to imagine having that poor of an opinion about the pedal steel guitar, considering he was inducted into the Pedal Steel Guitar Hall of Fame in 1978. And nearly all of the old-time steel guitarists, they all credited Alvino Rey as an inspiration. That's the hardest thing for me to reconcile about this side story that I'm telling you. It kind of feels like, in his mind, he was the only one who got it right. But lest I throw Alvino Rey under the bus completely, let's check out his sound and style now and look at some of the really cool things that he invented and introduced to the world of steel guitar. In the interview we just watched, he's describing how the modern guitar, he describes them as having become an explosion of electrical noises. And this is truly ironic. If I have to summarize Alvino Rey's sound and style, I think an explosion of electronic noises is actually a perfect description of his playing. He literally made a career out of sound effects. And you'll notice in the clips that we saw, he's playing with a flat pick, and he's not using any finger picks whatsoever. That was his style. Aside from the talking steel and all these sound effects he did, he also liked to play fat chords, which were really beautiful at times, and he was very good at playing harmonics. Also, the effects that he created with the tone and volume knob here, like that wah-wah sort of simulation, that gimmick, well, absolutely. That technique, as well as the harmonics, these are techniques that have become standard throughout the history of steel guitar playing. So we do have to give Alvino Rey full credit for that. He would also become a big influence on a lot of players like Bob Kofer, Speedy West, of course, Kate and Roberts for sure. Of all the albums and all the records that Alvino Rey is featured on, I think for me absolutely, it's, I think, the best record. This is Refreshing Melodies. Now this is the Ralph Carmichael Orchestra. This is on Sacred Recordings, I think is the name of the label. Sacred Recordings out of Waco, Texas, of course, everyone's favorite town and everyone's favorite record label. And this is a beautiful record. He's not doing anything mind-blowing on here, but this is these are all the standards. What a Friend We Have in Jesus. All the classic gospel numbers are here. And what's great about this album is that he's not doing any gimmicky stuff. He's not doing the sound effects. He's playing those beautiful chords. He's playing harmonics. And it's just a really laid-back, really beautiful, kind of easy listening record. Let me play a little bit of this for you right now. The track is The Way of the Cross. And there's a nice little passage that he does here where you can just hear him playing some beautiful stuff. Now, to be fair, this record came out in 1958. So at that same time, we have Jerry Byrd, Buddy Emmons, Jimmy Day, all of these virtuoso, great steel guitar and pedal steel players creating music at this time. If you put that aside and consider that Alvino Rey had been kind of perfecting his own style here for now almost 20 years, you can see how these Carmichael Orchestra records are really a great document of Alvino Rey's style. As for the guitars that Alvino Rey played, I'm probably going to butcher this, but he played a Gibson Console Grand. The one that he played, I guess, apparently had 9 strings on it, but this is just a standard Gibson console we see here. He later played the Gibson Electro Harp, which I think he had a hand in creating. That had a cabinet to the floor. It was quite a spectacle of a guitar, actually. Too much to pack up and travel with, but very cool for TV appearances. We can see some different photos here of the Gibson Electro Harp and different versions of it in different stages. For a while, I guess he was playing the Fender 1000 because I have this image of him here. This is an advert of him with that guitar. Later on in his career, he went on to play a Showbud, a single neck 10 string with 11 pedals. I do have a picture of that here. It's the only picture I can find of him with that guitar. The last guitar that he played, according to research, was a Sierra. And there's no photograph of the particular guitar that he had, but he apparently played it in the E6 tuning, and he had many different pedal setups that were later used on the C6 pedal steel guitar. And I believe that one of Alvino Rey's early models of pedal guitar is actually on display at the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville, ironically. So in conclusion, I have great news for you. Steel guitarists and the steel guitar community, they love Alvino Rey. Despite his indifference about the pedal steel, which I've really put a spotlight on here in this video because it's something different that I think a lot of people are kind of unaware of, the steel guitar community has actually always been very, very kind to Alvino Rey, despite what he may or may not have said. He was one of the very first inductees into the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame, 1978. Yeah, he was inducted with Jerry Byrd and Leon McAuliffe. He played at Scotty's conventions. He played at them 3 or 4 times, I think. Despite the drama that I've created here with this video, Alvino Rey was definitely the first player to play with pedals, and for that reason, we could call him the father of the pedal steel guitar. I think for all his comments and thoughts about pedal steel guitar, it doesn't really take away from his achievements, but it does make me feel kind of weird about calling him the father of the pedal steel, which I'm sure you can understand at this point. I think Hawaiians are the real forefathers of the steel guitar for sure. And as for the pedal steel guitar, I think it was a group effort, and Alvino Rey had a very big part in that group effort. But it was not really the idea of a single person, I don't believe. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if I got it all wrong, then you can let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. Remember to take care, keep it country, and we'll see you next time for episode 10, which is going to be the last part in this initial portion of the pioneers of the steel guitar. After this, we're going to move on to mostly country western players and a lot of players that you've requested to hear about, like Ralph Mooney and Norm Hamlet and Curly Chalker, etc. Okay, take care, and we'll see you next time.